Hi, welcome to our third Coffee with Cassie, and I'm very excited to be here today with Brian Olson, a local business leader here at Cup and Crepe in South Everett to talk about one of the most important crises we're facing right now in the City of Everett and honestly across the country, which is the meth and fentanyl crisis. Good morning, Brian. Thanks for joining me. I know you're a business leader. You've been in this community for a really long time. People might know your work with Alfie's Pizza and other businesses, but I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit of your background. I invited you to join me today because you'd reached out about this very issue.
Well, I've lived in this community since 1968, raised three kids that still live in Everett and now have grandkids. My brother and I owned and operated Alfie's Pizza up until 2012. And currently I own Olson Investment and Management Company, which owns and operates residential and commercial buildings and properties, a lot in Snohomish County and Everett.
So your properties are where you've experienced some challenges, I know, recently, and you came to my office and had some, it was a great conversation that we had. You had some concerns and suggestions for what we might do. Do you want to share a little bit about what you were experiencing?
Yeah, so, going back through the years, I recall the upbringing that I had in this community and, a safe environment, for places for our kids and grandkids and growing up to be able to ride your bikes, go to school, go to the parks. And as time has went on, the drug issues have become much more prevalent, and it's concerning to me. I mean, I've got tenants that are having homeless people that are on drugs, camping out in front of their businesses. They can't get into their business. Customers and clients can't get into their businesses. They try to avoid the confrontations, but typically because the person that's there, because they're on drugs, ends up being that we end up having to call the police. And so that then leads into the police officer showing up and then the paramedic showing up and the fire department showing up, using a lot of the resources that we have that, really we shouldn't have to be doing.
Yeah.
So with that, in the last episode we had a gentleman that passed out in front of one of our businesses. I happened to be there to get the mail out front and tried to wake him up, and he didn't, so I had to, call 911. And they show up, they grab his license, and they see that this gentleman had been seen 2 times in that week. And I said, well, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
And he says, well, that's nothing. We've seen one guy 5 times in one day.
Yeah.
And this is to a point where they're shooting Narcan, and so it's not just the inconvenience. What comes with it is the graffiti and all the garbage.
It is an incredible challenge that our community is facing right now.
Yes.
You referenced the amount of resources that we have to deploy to try to help people. The drugs that we're dealing with today are so different. You referenced what the community was like when you were growing up, and there was probably some folks that were abusing alcohol or other drugs at that time too, but the drugs that we're dealing with today are deadly and incredibly dangerous. The fentanyl, they put it almost in all street drugs that people are getting. And the meth that is on the streets today is really, really damaging people's ability to function. It's not just that they're getting a high, they're really damaging their brain and becoming psychotic. And so I've heard, just like you're sharing, that folks are, kind of get escalate or get aggressive. Sometimes people are dealing with someone who's passed out and OD'd, and then we have to call the paramedics. Or sometimes folks are dealing with somebody who is really in a behavioral health crisis, sometimes due to the drugs that they have just consumed. And then we call Everett Police Department because people don't feel safe. Right. And so it is an incredibly big crisis that we're dealing with here in our community.
What do you think we should do, or what's the plan?
The city is trying to do a lot to address this, the county, my fellow mayors, but it is not something that any one of us can fix. Biggest barriers to what we're seeing and why we can't do more is a lack of treatment beds. There's I can't even remember how many beds we have across the county. So if we have somebody who we want to get into a detox center or a treatment center, the wait might be months. We also have episodes where, like, let's say somebody was really escalated, you call the police department, we come and we take somebody to the jail. If they're high and on drugs, sometimes they have to then go to the ER. Or if it's they have other health issues, high blood pressure, the jail won't even take them because they don't have the capacity to do all that work. Although we do drug treatment in the jail, which I think is great. Suboxone treatment happens in the jail for those folks that are addicted. But then, whatever their crime was, let's say it was a misdemeanor level crime, they're only in jail for like 3 days. And then they're released, right? And what happens there is they are not fully even detoxed, let alone ready to receive Suboxone and take care of themselves.
So those people then that are released, they could have came from any other city.
That's correct.
Because they don't have a jail system or a court system.
That's correct.
So they come from other cities,
Yep.
come to the city of Everett, get released, obviously probably don't have family, friends to pick them up, to take them back to whatever town in Snohomish County that they came from. So it escalates a problem that we already have.
That's right.
With a lack of funding on top of that.
And I think we have the drug dealers that are aware of this, right? That is why you mentioned tagging and graffiti and things like that. That is definitely related to these groups of people that are selling drugs in our community. And the reason they're doing that here in the county seat and other county seats across the state is because this is kind of the epicenter. They know that there's a vulnerable population, whether they're stepping out of the ER or stepping out of jail, that they can then immediately sell and
Right.
keep themselves in business.
We talk about more treatment centers and more treatment, which I think is a great idea. I think we need that. But what do you do with the people that don't want to be treated?
That is a great question.
But yet they're still out on the streets
Yeah.
doing, committing crimes and
Yeah.
not being held accountable, having no consequences. What do you do with those folks? And how do you handle that?
Great question. And that is, I think, what makes this drug crisis so different than anything we've ever experienced as a country. Even when someone's on heroin, they get a high, a euphoric high, and then they come down and they might hit this rock bottom point where they want help. Alcoholics often hit a rock bottom where they want help. Other addicts will go through that phase. That doesn't happen with these drugs. Fentanyl and meth are so different, and how they affect their brain is so different. It's not this euphoric high. It's more of just avoiding the pain of detox. And so it's not that folks never want treatment. I think people on fentanyl often will try, but the prevalence of the drugs is they're so cheap, they're readily available. Detox is painful. They might have to wait weeks actually to get into a program. And there's so many barriers, and the drugs are so readily available, cheap everywhere. And so that can be a real challenge. I think the other thing I want to mention is oftentimes, this is criminal activity, right? So we can arrest people when they're engaged in criminal activity. We don't want to criminalize substance use disorder. We want to help folks, but we can arrest them if they're engaged in illegal behavior. However, if we bring that person to jail and they're determined not competent enough to assist in their own defense, probably because of the severe behavioral health challenges that they're dealing with, then we need to get them into a competency restoration is what it's called, or a mental health facility where they can get the help they need to actually get well enough to then be held accountable for their crimes. The wait for those beds, behavioral health beds, it can be 18 months. And so they just end up right back out on our streets.
What is the city trying to do now to try to help this situation and to help these people and to maybe open more mental health and addiction centers and maybe increase the police force?
We're trying to do all those things simultaneously. We have added folks to our police department. I know that sometimes just the presence of officers can help people feel safer and help discourage bad behavior or illegal activity. But we also have social workers. We have social workers embedded with our police department. We have social workers with our fire department. We have social workers in our libraries. We, as a city, care deeply about everybody in our community, and so we're really trying to create as many pathways as possible into the services that we do have. Our community development team also works in partnership with all of the nonprofits that are here in our community and the faith-based communities that are also trying to do what they can to address this crisis. And so the city can't do this alone. It is an entire community that needs to come together to try to create the systems to get these folks help. A lot of what I've also done and what we are doing is advocating for the resources we need. Together with Mayor Nearing and other mayors across the county, we have been advocating as a group of mayors and business leaders for public safety for more treatment centers, more tools for our law enforcement to successfully hold people accountable with compassion, right? That compassion is important because across the county, no one wants to criminalize this behavior. We really want to save lives. Folks are dying on our streets. As you mentioned, we have sometimes the same individual receiving Narcan multiple times a week or multiple times a day. And so this can't continue like that, right? We have to have all of our systems come together and see where the gaps are. And try to address that. And so, but I am proud of the work we're doing as a city. We really have a dedicated community development team. We have dedicated people in public works. We have dedicated people in parks and police and fire that are all, and our library that are really working together to try to get people the supports that they need, even when we don't have enough services here.
So what can the city do, for example? I mean, when you drive down, just about any part of the city, be it 41st Street or down Rucker, and you see the big piles of, homeless, garbage and shopping carts and all of that's there, and they're camping out there and they're blocking a business. Does the police officers have the ability to get them to move on? And if you do get them to move on, do they just move to the next building? And how do you work with that? And how do we, because I know they maybe haven't created created a crime, and maybe not even doing drugs right then, but they're blocking not only the business, but it's the appearance for the city of Everett, the businesses, is affecting the city because businesses are closing and people are leaving because they can't do business or they don't feel safe to do business.
If individuals are blocking the sidewalks, if they're leaving garbage, if there's kind of like a lot of kind of remnants of somebody that has been there and there's just a bunch of garbage around, we have an encampment team. We clean up those areas. We try to deploy those resources as quickly as possible. There's an Everett at Work app that folks can like take a picture, send that in to us, and then we know that there's a site there and we try to deploy our resources as quickly as possible. Good. So that's one thing we can do. When we have folks that are not blocking, they're just kind of there. Obviously, everyone has a right to use our parks, to use our sidewalks, but they shouldn't be engaged in any illegal activity. So if they're engaged in illegal activity, we can address that. If they're really just making it uncomfortable because they're maybe in a mental health crisis or on drugs, and they, people are scared, our officers, our social workers really try to move them along, again, try to connect them with services. And so we have a non-emergency line that people call. We also have 911, obviously, if anyone doesn't feel safe. So there's things like that we can do. But in all honesty, the laws don't allow us to just, sometimes I'll have businesses call and say, why can't you just take these people away? And it's like, no, I can't. These are our neighbors.
Even if they're on private property?
Now, if they're on private property, that's different. And then we encourage all businesses to have no trespassing signs. And then our officers and team members can go onto private property and remove people if there's no trespassing. If there's not a no trespassing sign, there's nothing we can do. We can call the business and say, hey, this is happening.
Right.
But if it's nighttime and they're not there, that's really there's nothing that we legally can do. But in the rights of ways and common spaces, if it's causing a problem, if there's fear, if there's illegal behavior, sometimes it's a negotiation with our team to try to move them along. And I think it's our duty as a society to do what we can to protect them and protect the community around them. You shared a little bit about the impacts you're experiencing and have experienced as a business owner. Can you give a few more details of what specifically you're seeing that are causing the real challenges for you in this community?
Yeah, I think with myself and with other businesses within the community, we're losing businesses. I mean, businesses that are closing because it's affecting their bottom line. We've got a number of businesses, as we all know, we go into the drugstore, the grocery store, where people just come in and take what they want, right, and then leave, and that affects businesses, and be it as big as Target or Walmart or the small little convenience store, the numbers become harder and harder all the time for businesses to make a profit. They're struggling with a lot of increased property taxes and labor increases, and now you've got security. We used to have landscaping that would come into each property once a week. Now they come in every day.
Wow.
We've had to spend more money on cameras. Mm-hmm. We have a full-time crew now that, as soon as the graffiti hits, it gets cleaned off, mm-hmm. Because you can't leave it there. So I think with not just our business, but many businesses, if we don't address this, we're gonna lose businesses. We're gonna see vacancies, not just downtown, but throughout the city and the county. And when that happens, we then lose employment.
Yeah. And
we need the employment because we need the tax base to be able to fund everything that we're talking about wanting to take care of, right? That's right. So it's just kind of this vicious circle mm-hmm. that if we don't get it addressed, it's just going to snowball. And then people start leaving. First, they leave as a resident because they want to get out. They don't want to be around it. So they move to another area where they don't see it, maybe like an Edmonds or a Mill Creek or something, because smaller community, not the county seat. And then it gets to be that then they get established there and they don't want to, fight the commute. So then they pull their business, right? Mm-hmm. Or they decide that we're not going to work downtown, we're going to work from home. Mm-hmm. But yet we need people to go back to work. That's because all that those businesses, that supports our businesses, right?
Yeah. So, and that funds all the programs we need. You're so right. I want to talk a little bit about the issue that you mentioned of shoplifting, yes. right? That has become a real challenge, yes. and it is directly related to this crisis, right? Folks are feeding their addiction by stealing goods. We are being as proactive as we can on that. I would encourage other businesses to let us know when they're experiencing high levels of those activities in their stores. We've been working with some of our local stores doing operations with our police department to really catch people that are engaged in this activity. And so it's important for us to know where that's happening. And I also, we care deeply about our businesses. Not only are they a vital part of our community, they're a vital job center, and they provide the revenue that the city needs to have roads and police and fire and parks and everything that we want the city to provide, as well as the human services and taking care of these vulnerable residents. And so if businesses are really struggling because of this, the city wants to be a partner. We can send a team to help with, crime prevention by environmental design, to kind of help businesses understand like this type of lighting or these types of cameras. But you're right, it's costing businesses more, and that's why we together need to do more to address this. I want to hear a little bit about your vision for Everett. We're a growing community, right? So we probably are going to be a little different as our population is going to grow up to about 160,000 people. But as a father and grandfather, what's your vision for the future?
I'd like to see, additional mental health and addiction centers. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see more police officers to be empowered to do their job. Have more social workers on the streets that can help. Lose the division, as we talked earlier, of the Republican-Democrat thing and focus on the importance of our kids and the community, mm-hmm. and separate, our political thoughts and focus on really what the basics of what's important, right? Safety and getting drugs off the streets and crime. And it all kind of it really begins, in my mind, it begins with drugs. And once someone gets on the drugs, then it leads to homelessness, because they probably lose their job and they lose their license, and then they end up on the streets. And it just is this. It's
kind of what deteriorates.
It deteriorates. It just starts to get worse and worse all the time. So to answer that, I would really like to see that we lose the division, and we come together and we work together as a community, because it takes a village, mm-hmm. right? And not point the fingers and not put blame, but to really step up and try to make a difference.
That's what I love about Everett, right? I think there's not a resident, a business, or a community leader that I know that doesn't have that same passion for how can we make this community stronger, better. My vision, my hope for our community, our city, is that it is a place that my daughter can walk to school, she can walk home, she can afford a place to live when she grows up, she feels safe. I want your children and grandchildren to feel safe. I want small businesses to locate here downtown in South Everett and feel like they are an important, vital part of the community and provide for their families and feel safe going to and from work. And I want our large companies to thrive as well. I think Everett is an amazing, beautiful city. And I'm very proud to live in Everett. And this crisis is something that we need this community all together, as you've said, to rally around and work to address it. But I believe that we can, and hopefully we'll get that vision of our future that we both want.
I agree. Yeah. So what can the local business people and the local residents do to help?
Well, I think doing exactly what you've done. You reached out and called. You said, I have these challenges and I want to understand what's going on, and I want to be a part of working with you to develop the solutions. I think that is what we need. If we don't know where the problems are, exactly what our community is experiencing, we don't know where to deploy our resources to try to address it. So letting your elected leaders, letting me know, letting your county elected leaders, and letting your state elected leaders know. Oftentimes, it's your local community, your city council members, your mayor, that hears and sees these issues. But some of the higher levels of government, the state or federal level, they don't see these issues because they don't live in Everett. And so hearing from us of what's not working and what our community needs can help get us the resources we need to build those treatment centers. So that advocating is really important. And I think the other thing is just engaging in the community. Join your neighborhood group, form a neighborhood block watch. Go attend our events and things that are happening. It's wintertide this season, and any time that people are positively, actively engaging with their local neighbors, their local parks, it's activating the space. It's putting more eyes on the street, and it is really part of making a safer community. We couldn't possibly have officers on every corner. I often will say that to residents, but we can have residents. We have residents if you're out walking, if you're out in a park, and you're getting to know each other. That is actually activating the space and putting that positive energy in there. And then obviously, going to our events, supporting local businesses, that helps counter some of the challenges that our businesses are experiencing. It's been a great conversation about a really important topic with you. The drug crisis that we're facing is real, and as you've said, we need to bring the community together. So I'm forming a drug crisis task force and bringing business leaders together, bringing local nonprofits, faith-based leaders, subject matter experts, people with lived experience, and obviously, police, fire, government folks to talk about what are the challenges and barriers to fixing this. Where is our system breaking down? And what can we do to address it, as well as hopefully hearing best practices from other communities. We've been looking into what are other communities doing, and if there's something that's working in another state, I would love to bring that here to our city. So,
no, I think that we need to get everybody needs to get involved, and not just sit back and either pretend it's not happening or pointing the finger. I think everybody has a responsibility and to do what they can, be it financially or, serving on city council or wherever it may be, to try to make a change. Because the last thing any of us want, I mean, we have kids and grandkids, and now it's starting to penetrate into the schools and into the parks, and none of us want that, right? I mean, so I think we all have to step to the plate and do something. And make this
that about you.
well, and make this a better place than it was left to us.
Yeah,
we have that responsibility, right? I really believe that.
Well, Brian, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciated our conversation, and I also want to do a shout out and thanks to Cup and Crepe and Teresa for the delicious coffee. And this place is a fantastic place to visit, so I hope everyone takes the opportunity to visit it in Everett Mall Way. But really appreciate the time today to discuss this really important topic. So this is the first part of this segment. This is such an important topic. We definitely want to dig into it more. Our next section is going to be with one of our community development team members, so please stay tuned.